But it's a real pleasure and always an honour to talk to John Howard, and he's in absolute top form when he talks about not just what's in the book, and we'll get to that in a second, but of course I had to ask him about this game being played by the Prime Minister about over-egging the pudding and overdoing the attacks on the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Now, as you know, I've, like everyone else, rolled my eyes, pointed my fingers, pointed out all of the obvious issues when it comes to the former Prime Minister and the appointment of these extra ministries. But I want to get to the contemporary now, which is Anthony Albanese seems absolutely obsessed with trying to turn this into some sort of Australia's version of January 6. He's trying to get it to a royal commission. I think he's over-egging this. Do you think he's being overly personal about something that we all agree was wrong, but we all know can be fixed with 2 lines of legislation?
Well, it would just be fixed if it didn't happen again. But you can have legislation if you want. I mean, it was a mistake, and I'm sorry Scott did it to hurt him reputation-wise. But it is not a hanging offence. And let me put it this way, borrowing the title of my new book, A Sense of Balance, I think Mr Albanese is being very unbalanced in his response. I mean, the idea that you'll have some kind of further inquiry, the Solicitor General, who's an eminent lawyer, and I'm interested in his opinion on the law, his opinion on the politics is no different from anybody else's, and I'm not particularly influenced by that. I can make up my own mind, as your listeners can. But the truth is that Albanese won the election. He said that democracy was undermined. Hey, he won. I mean, the essence of undermining democracy is denying the will of the people. And we had an expression of that will. They decided on the 21st of May, albeit very reluctantly, they decided to install Mr Albanese as Prime Minister. So he should recognise that. He should stop behaving like an opposition leader and get on with being the Prime Minister. That sort of, undergraduate mudslinging doesn't cut the mustard, if I can mix my metaphors, with the Australian public. They want Mr Albanese to do a good job. I want him to do a good job. I don't agree with his politics, but he's the Prime Minister. He's there because he has a majority in the House of Representatives, and that decides whether or not you're the Prime Minister of this country. Last time I checked, he just ought to get on with it, and he's made the point. I don't think there are many people around the place who are saying that what Scott did was correct, but it wasn't illegal. It was quite constitutional. No damage has been done to anybody or to any important policy. It has highlighted the extraordinary discretion which is in the hands of the Prime Minister in any system of government, and it just underlines the point that you've got to make sure the person you install as the Prime Minister is fit for purpose. I certainly thought Scott Morrison was very fit for the purpose of keeping Australia safe during the pandemic, and to the extent that this incident may have qualified the public's respect for the job he did, I'm sorry, but that is how it is.
No, I'm with you. There's got to be sort of a note of caution here too, that I understand, when you've just become the Prime Minister, the media's telling you that you've already won your second term because the first polls are good, everyone's got that new car smell, that they think they can be there forever. But it feels to me that the pace of action from this new government is relatively slow, especially on key things that help determine where the mob went on the 21st of May, namely, and as you know I consistently talk about cost of living. What advice would you give, even though he's of not the political stripe, and again, we disagree with the ideas, but do you want him to start to get on with things? Because it seems to me that he's trying to keep that new car smell for as long as possible, but government is about decisions, not discussion.
Focus on the now and the future. He won the election. It was a very grudging victory. He only got 32.7% of the primary vote. It was terrible compared with other changes of government since the war, but he won. He won more seats than the coalition did, and he's entitled to govern. and he's there for 3 years, but he just would get on with it. But banging on, I mean, 9 days of squeezing the lemon on a mistake, a political error, which Scott Morrison committed. He didn't do anything illegal. He wasn't trying to subvert the Constitution. He was, for more abundant caution, doubling up in a way that he should never have entertained doing. I wouldn't have done that. I don't think any other Prime Minister in recent times would have done it. But it's happened, it's over, and it's hurt Scott Morrison more than anybody else, unfortunately, and I'm sorry about that, because I thought he did a very good job with the pandemic. But I just say to the new Prime Minister, you know, he's a political opponent of mine, but I don't have any personal hostility to him. Get on with it.
I'm with you completely. Now, of course, all of us did deep thinking during the COVID times. You put that thought into this book, and I want everyone to get a copy for themselves, for their father, and for everyone else, because this is a good thing to read, mums as well, about sense of balance. Now, obviously on this show, we get right into the granular of the day-to-day fight about the things that we care about. And when you are in it all day, every day, it feels like that we have lost that sense of balance, that the idea is that essentially sort of the raw pursuit of power is an arm wrestle, and as soon as the arm wrestle goes 51% in one direction, then 49% of Australia is to be ignored. That certainly seems to be the way when it comes to any sort of dissent on The Voice, any sort of dissent on the transition on climate change, any sort of dissent or want to argue on the decisions being made by government.
I mean, this debate about The Voice, let's have the debate, but whether you oppose it or you support it ought not to be a test of whether you care for the Indigenous people of this country. We all do, well, most of us, except the small number of very bigoted, insensitive people. But a lot of people think, well, the best way to help them is to improve their educational opportunities, their health, and that is far more important than any symbolism that is clearly involved in something like The Voice. Please let it not be some kind of virility test of how strongly you feel and care for the Indigenous people. People can care passionately and work for them, but strongly oppose any change at all in the Constitution because they're worried about the longer term implications of that. They don't like the idea of a separate group of Australians having a separate role in the law-making of the country. Once again, I just ask on this issue that we preserve that sense of balance.
Now, in Australia, obviously, the number one concern of Australians, 88% of people say cost of living, inflation. Yet, of course, it doesn't dominate in the political discussion like the former Prime Minister, the extra ministries thing did. What are some of the levers that a government can pull to bring down the cost of living?
The best observation I can make is to have good, sound economic policies, not spend too much, because the more you spend as a government, the more you have to borrow to cover the deficit, and there's a big deficit at the moment. And I think on that issue, incidentally, we should have a bit of honesty from the new government. We have an extremely big debt at the moment, and we know the reason for that. We borrowed a lot of money to pull the country out of recession, into which the government had placed the Australian economy in order to protect the health and the lives of Australians. And can I say that was a bipartisan decision? The Labor Party supported going into debt. They wanted to go even deeper into debt. And now when I hear Dr. Chalmers saying, oh, we inherited this huge Liberal debt, he ought to say we inherited this huge bipartisan debt. It's a Liberal-Labor debt. It's not just a Liberal debt. I mean, I didn't hear the Labor Party criticising Josh Frydenberg for not spending enough money. I heard them saying he ought to spend more. Now, really, it is the height of hypocrisy for the Labor Party now to turn around and say, oh, this is terrible, this debt. What they should acknowledge is that we had special circumstances. We had to go into debt.
The dedication of the book is to your grandchildren in a hope that Australia will be as good to them as it was to you. What do you think you're like as a grandfather, and how are you different as a grandfather than you were as a father? Give me an example of Papa John.
Well, look, I love being with my grandchildren. They range in age from 15 down to 2. Fortunately, we are a close family, and I regard it as the greatest success of my life to have built a close relationship with my adult children and through them, my grandchildren.
A Sense of Balance is the name of his book, the author, John Howard.